Hi, welcome to another episode of Webcam Sessions. This week we're going to talk about thinking differently, and specifically using muscle memory to realize that sometimes we need to play things a different way than we might have initially learned them. Oftentimes we think when we're learning a chord that we need to fret it a certain way. So take a C chord, for instance. Oftentimes we're taught to just play it with our ring finger just like this, and there's our C chord, and there, now I have a C chord. I know exactly what to do. And every time I see a C chord, I just take my ring finger and place it here on the 3rd fret of the A. But the problem is that depending on what comes before or after that C chord, we might need to play it a different way. And so we're going to take a look at an exercise with G7, G, and C to kind of showcase this concept. So most people know how to play a C chord with the ring finger, again, just on the 3rd fret of the A string, right? And one of the first chords we learn after a C is oftentimes G7, which we just take our ring finger and we slide it down to the 2nd fret of the A string, stack our middle finger here on the 2nd fret of the C string, and finally take our index and place it on the 1st fret of the E string, right? So we have 2 on the C, 1 on the E, and 2 on the A. Now when I go back and forth between my G7 and my C chord, it looks something like this, right? Very efficient, very effective. Now, oftentimes people will learn a G chord shortly after that. And if you don't know how to play a G chord, what you do is take your middle finger, place it here on the 2nd fret of the A string, take your index, place it on the 2nd fret of the C string, take your ring, place it on the 3rd fret of the E string. Now, when I play this G chord, and then I go to a C chord with my ring finger the way I was just doing it, you'll see that I'm having to take off all 3 of these fingers to go back and forth. And so instead of playing the C chord with our ring finger like we originally learned, why not play it with our middle finger instead? Well, if we play it with our middle finger, what you'll notice is coming from the G chord, all that we have to do is take the index and ring fingers off and slide the middle up just 1 fret, which makes this transition very efficient and very effective going from here to here. See how much easier it is by just using that middle finger to play my C chord instead of using my ring finger. But if I were playing a G7 to C, using my middle finger doesn't make much sense, right? Because now my middle finger would have to jump all the way down, and that's why the ring finger is actually better to play a C chord when you're playing a G7. So the moral of the story is that the way to play a C chord isn't one thing. It's an ever-changing thing based on what you played before and what you're about to play next. In an earlier webcam sessions, we talked about a G chord to an E minor. So there's a lot of different ways to play chords. In fact, if we think of that E minor just one more time here, and then we go to a C right after it, well, I could just play that C chord with my index finger by sliding it up a fret. And now we've successfully played a C chord with our index finger, we've played it with our middle finger, and we've played it with our ring finger, with different reasons each time, depending on the chord that precedes it. So what I would challenge you to do is take a look at chord progressions that you're playing and see, is there a more effective way I can fret this chord that might not be the way that I originally learned, but is a way that's much more efficient for that particular song or exercise. And this is especially common when you're working on different pieces of tabs. So when you're working on a solo arrangement of some sort of song, you might see a familiar chord voicing but have to play it in a different way depending on what comes before or after it. So one more example here, one of my favorites, is if I play an F chord and then I want to play the Hawaiian D7, which is the 2-0-2-0. Well, the F chord is played with my middle finger on the G string 2nd fret and my index finger here on the 1st fret of the E string. And the Hawaiian D7 is played oftentimes as index here on 2 of the G and middle finger here on 2 of the E, and just those 2 there. That's the way that you typically will learn it. But this is kind of a tricky motion because I'm jumping back and forth. And let's say that my song is going from an F to that D7. Well, instead of flip-flopping all the fingers, I could just take my ring finger and place it on the 2nd fret of the E string. So you see, this and this are the same thing. I'm just using different fingers to do it. And now my F chord is really easy. So if I'm going back and forth between these chords, I just need to add that finger. That's kind of another layer to this, right? Where sometimes you can play a chord by leaving the previous chord in position and just adding something to it, like you could in this particular instance, right? So always be on the lookout for different ways to play chords. Always be a little bit, have a little healthy speculation for, is this the right way and most efficient way? And I guarantee you, if you take a look at it, you might find a new way that works better for some song at some point. So as always, if you have any questions, leave it down in a comment below. And if there's a particular chord progression that maybe you have trouble with or found a different way of playing, feel free and comment down below. I'd love to see what sort of examples you guys are seeing, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode of Webcam Sessions.